People woke up to a strange feeling of heaviness behind their shoulder blades. Hundreds of millions of people simultaneously ran their hands back and felt soft, warm, dense feathers. Panic swept through their homes like wildfire. Wings weren't an accessory, not a decoration, but a part of the body, alive, responsive to touch, trembling in the cold air. The brain refused to accept the new sensation of weight, balance was disrupted, and people stumbled simply by trying to stand. Thus began the day when humanity woke up as a different species. Controlling wings proved less natural than moving an arm. It was an entirely new set of muscles that had to be learned from scratch. People tried to tense their shoulder blades, and the feathers only trembled slightly. If they tried to flap sharply, they lost their balance and fell forward, catching themselves on furniture. Parks and courtyards became training grounds. Everyone tried to imitate the movements of birds, but the elasticity of the wings was different, the amplitude greater, and the strength weaker. Only a few managed to rise half a meter. When the first daredevils finally leaped and stayed in the air just a little longer than a normal jump, the streets echoed with cries of delight. It was a historic moment. For the first time, humans pushed off the ground using their new organs. But the joy was short-lived. The first falls were painful. Their wings weren't yet able to cushion the impact, and their brains couldn't calculate a safe trajectory. People fell on their knees, on their backs, into bushes, over fences. But no one gave up. After a few days, it became clear, wings require energy. Lots of energy. People were constantly hungry, protein, fat, anything that could fuel their new muscles. Athletes rejoiced, their bodies adapted faster, but office workers were surprised to notice that even trying to spread their wings left them short of breath. The strain on their hearts increased, their posture changed, their backs ached. Humanity literally felt the force of evolution pushing through change. Clothing became the first casualty of the new anatomy. Shirts split at the shoulder blades, jackets wouldn't fit, and school uniforms became a collection of torn fabrics. The world urgently demanded new standards, wings required holes, flexible fabrics, and reinforced seams. Fashion houses frantically redesigned their collections, some made slits, others created wing vests, and still others tried to hide the wings in folds of fabric, but this looked ridiculous. The first light flights created unexpected problems. People began to rise into the air above sidewalks, frightening passers-by. Airways appeared under windows, making it impossible to navigate safely. Inexperienced pilots collided with each other, fell onto balconies, and toppled store signs. Authorities in some countries introduced emergency regulations. Flying within 3 meters of windows is prohibited. Taking off indoors is prohibited. Flying only over designated areas. But as soon as anyone began to feel confident, the rules were broken. Governments began organizing free flight safety courses. Instructors, those who had mastered the air faster than others, taught beginners how to spread their wings, maintain balance, and avoid sharp turns. The lessons resembled a combination of a sports club and a therapy group. People were afraid of heights, afraid of falling, afraid of losing control. But the dream of flying overcame their fear. The higher people climbed, the more serious the problems became. In the first weeks, hundreds of incidents occurred, collisions over roads, falls into cars, getting stuck in trees. But the most dangerous situation was lost a wing, when tired muscles gave out in midair. People fell rapidly, and only a few instinctively managed to open their wings to slow the impact. When people finally got the hang of the air, an unexpected threat arose: air traffic jams. Cities began to have traffic levels, 2 meters above the ground, 5 meters, 10. Chaos at each level. People tried to overtake each other, creating the risk of collisions. The police were unable to control the situation. Air currents had become a new type of traffic, far more complex than ground traffic. To resolve the chaos, a new service was created: air police. These were the most experienced pilots, capable of maneuvering quickly, sharply, and precisely. They patrolled the city skies, dispersed traffic jams, monitored violators, and rescued those losing altitude. But in the first weeks, there were too few of them. Airspace turned out to be far more complex than anyone could have imagined. Cities had to be rebuilt. Ordinary rooftops became death traps, too sharp angles, too many advertising structures. Architects began designing smooth, rounded roofs, landing pads on every other building, and air bridges, platforms on which one could land safely. The world was gradually transforming into a multi-level vertical structure. A new problem emerged unexpectedly: claustrophobia turned into aerophobia. People who had never been afraid of heights began to panic at 8 to 10 meters. Their wings trembled, their muscles tensed, and they suddenly lost control and descended, almost falling. Psychologists in the age of wings became the most sought-after profession. Flying became not a physical, but an emotional workout. Jobs no one had previously considered emerged. Urban air traffic navigator. Emergency fall instructor. Feather mechanic, because feathers broke, fell out, and required cleaning. Courier pilots who delivered cargo faster than any drone. The world was adapting to a new level of freedom and responsibility. As wings grew stronger, people began risky long-distance flights. They flew over highways, rivers, and deserts. The air opened up new roads, free of traffic lights and congestion. But prolonged soaring required incredible endurance. Many fell from exhaustion. Air police created rescue teams patrolling kilometers of routes. Companies began using the air as a new transportation layer. Warehouse complexes built landing platforms for workers. Couriers gained an advantage: deliveries now took place not along congested roads, but directly, along the shortest route between 2 points. But the economy faced a crisis in ground logistics: trucks became less in demand, drivers lost their jobs, and air travel became cheaper. The world began to restructure entire industries to use air as efficiently as possible. Even though everyone had wings, the possibilities for using them varied. Physically strong and fit people flew higher, stayed aloft longer, and were more resistant to the wind. Those in poor health could only make minimal use of their wings. A new term emerged: aerial inequality. Social pressure became a new form of discrimination. Crime quickly adapted. Sky gangs emerged, groups of young men patrolling the skies above neighborhoods. They intercepted helpless pilots, stole their bags, threatened to collide with them, or pushed them into dangerous areas. The police responded slowly. The air gave criminals an advantage: they dove between buildings, hid on rooftops, and disappeared into the night sky. Cities were forced to establish illuminated air corridors, safe routes for night flights. The world's armies realized that wings were a revolution. Soldiers no longer needed helicopters to traverse difficult terrain. Special forces began training in silent night flying, stealthy approaches, and high-altitude airlifts. But with this came a new nightmare: high casualties during training due to botched maneuvers. The army developed exoskeletons that reinforced wings to make soldiers more protected and stronger. The advent of wings sparked a spiritual explosion. Some religions saw it as a sign of chosenness. Others saw it as a threat to the natural order. New movements emerged: the ascended ones, who claimed that man had become closer to heaven. Churches rebuilt their spaces to accommodate flying parishioners. During services, clergymen rose into the air during prayers, creating the effect of majestic soaring. But other congregations, on the contrary, demanded that wings be concealed, considering them a temptation. Living with wings turned out to be much more difficult than expected. People caught their feathers on doorknobs, knocked over lamps, and found themselves unable to fit in chairs. Sleeping on their backs became nearly impossible: their wings pressed, creased, and hurt. People switched to special mattresses or slept on their sides, like birds. Pets also reacted differently. Cats tried to hunt feathers, dogs barked, trying to cling to them. Human flight disrupted the ecology. Birds lost their advantage. Some, fearing competition, migrated to areas free of human traffic. Others began attacking people, defending their aerial territories. Ornithologists demanded that flight altitudes be limited to maintain balance. For the first time in history, humans became a competitor to nature in aviation. Flight gave birth to a new entertainment culture. Air races, acrobatic tournaments, and climb speed games emerged. Athletes performed stunts, spins, and sharp dives, captivating spectators. Stadiums were converted into vertical arenas, where spectators watched competitions from all levels. For the first time, sports became fully three-dimensional. Countries began to dispute the right to air routes. Control zones were established above borders, where patrols monitored those crossing the border without permission. A new problem arose: illegal flights. People crossed borders at an altitude of 20 to 30 meters, bypassing ground posts. Diplomats worked around the clock to create uniform rules of air conduct for citizens.